Imagine if the entire history of the world was a giant, secret library, hidden behind a thick iron door. Only a few people had the key, and they controlled what you could read. Sounds like something out of a dystopian novel, right? But in a way, that's exactly what history has been for much of human civilization. The way we understand the past has been shaped by powerful people and cultures, and it's only in the last few centuries that we've started to unlock the door and explore the true stories of our ancestors. This essay will take you on a journey through the history of history itself, from ancient India and China to the groundbreaking work of Greek historians. We'll see how the way we tell stories about the past has evolved, and why it matters so much today. In ancient India, the concept of history was almost non-existent. The Hindu religion, with its emphasis on cycles of creation and destruction, didn't see the past as a linear progression. Instead, they believed in endless cycles, or kalpas, each lasting 32 billion years. During each kalpa, the world was created, destroyed, and recreated again. This cyclical view of time meant that the past was seen as repeating itself, and there was little interest in documenting specific events or changes. One of the most significant historical works from India is the Rajatarangini River of Kings, by the 12th century Kashmiri poet Kalhana. Even this work, however, focuses more on the moral lessons of the past rather than a factual account of events. The main interest of Hindu Indians was in the mythical Golden Age, where great kings and heroes lived. This lack of a historical record is a challenge for modern historians trying to piece together India's past. When the Muslims arrived in India in the 11th century, they brought a very different view of history. For Muslims, history was not a series of random events, but a fulfillment of God's plan. The Quran emphasized the stories of prophets and the spread of Islam, and Muslim historians focused on the achievements of their leaders and holy men. This meant that Muslim history was often written to celebrate the good ruler, and could be biased or sycophantic. One of the most influential Muslim historians was Ibn Khaldun, 1332–1406, who lived in North Africa. He wrote about the cycles of rise and fall in Muslim societies, and saw history as a way to understand the destiny of nations. However, his work was an exception, and most Muslim historical writing remained focused on biographies and the achievements of the elite. China has one of the longest continuous written records of any civilization, but this didn't lead to a modern historical consciousness. Confucianism, which was deeply rooted in ancestor worship, encouraged the keeping of detailed records, but these records were used to reinforce the status quo rather than to explore change. The most famous Chinese historian is Ssu-ma Ch'ien, who wrote the Shiji records of the Grand Historian. His work set the pattern for Chinese historical writing for the next 2,000 years. Ssu-ma Ch'ien's work was comprehensive, covering the lives of rulers, political and economic themes, and the biographies of important figures. However, his successors often froze his format into a rigid mold, leaving little room for interpretation. The writing of history became a government task, and the records were kept secret in government archives. This meant that the past was controlled by the state and used to justify the current order. The story of history in the West is dramatically different. The ancient Greeks are credited with inventing the concept of history as we know it today. The word history comes from the Greek historia, which means inquiry or knowing by inquiry. The Greeks were curious about the world around them and wanted to understand how things worked. One of the earliest and most influential Greek historians was Hecataeus of Miletus. He traveled widely and noted the differences in customs among various peoples. He was critical of Greek myths and legends, saying, "What the first write here is the account of what I consider to be true, for the stories of the Greeks are numerous and, in my opinion, ridiculous." Hecataeus's work was a departure from the mythological accounts of the past, and marked the beginning of a more scientific approach to history. The Greek approach to history was further developed by Herodotus, often called the father of history. Herodotus wrote the Histories, a detailed account of the Persian Wars and the cultures of various peoples. He combined factual reporting with engaging storytelling, making his work both informative and entertaining. Herodotus's method of inquiry and his focus on human actions and decisions laid the foundation for modern historical writing. Thucydides took historical writing to the next level. His History of the Peloponnesian War is a rigorous and analytical account of the conflict between Athens and Sparta. Thucydides was interested in the causes and consequences of events, and he tried to be as objective as possible. His work is considered a model of historical writing, and influenced many later historians. During the Middle Ages, the study of history in Europe was largely dominated by the Church. Monks and scholars wrote histories that were often focused on religious themes and the lives of saints. The Renaissance, however, brought a renewed interest in the classical world and a more critical approach to the past. Historians like Niccolò Machiavelli, 1469–1527, and Francesco Guicciardini, 1483–1540, wrote about the politics and power struggles of their time, influenced by the methods of the ancient Greeks and Romans. The Enlightenment in the 18th century marked a significant shift in the way history was studied. Philosophers and historians began to see history as a process of progress and development. They were interested in the causes of change and the role of human agency. This led to the development of historical methods that emphasized critical analysis and the use of evidence. One of the most influential historians of this period was Edward Gibbon, 1737–1794, who wrote The History of the Decline and Fall of the Roman Empire. Gibbon's work was a monumental study that combined narrative history with deep analysis. He was critical of the role of religion in the fall of Rome, and emphasized the importance of political and economic factors. In the 20th century, the work of sophisticated dictionary makers like James A. H. Murray, who worked on the Oxford English Dictionary, helped liberate the English language from the despotism of fixed definitions. The OED was designed to show the changing meanings of words over time, revealing the dynamic and responsive nature of language. This approach to language reflected a broader shift in the way history was understood. Instead of seeing the past as a fixed and unchanging narrative, historians began to see it as a living, evolving story. Why does all of this matter? Understanding the history of history helps us appreciate the complexity and diversity of human experiences. It shows us that the way we tell stories about the past is not neutral, but shaped by cultural and political forces. This awareness is crucial in a world where historical narratives are often used to justify current actions and policies. History is not just a collection of facts, it is a way of thinking about the world. By studying the past, we can gain insights into human behavior, social change, and the forces that shape our lives. This is why it's important to engage with history critically, and to seek out multiple perspectives. The journey through the history of history is a journey through the evolution of human thought and understanding. From the cyclical view of the Hindus to the critical inquiry of the Greeks, from the fulfillment of destiny in Muslim history to the rigorous analysis of the Enlightenment, each culture has contributed to our understanding of the past. The story of history is a story of progress, but it is also a story of struggle and conflict. By learning from the past, we can better navigate the challenges of the present and shape a more informed and just future.